I got to play 15 hours of the Marathon Alpha. I've never gotten a chance to play this game before. What do I think? Before I answer that question, I need to give you some context. So I'm Frostbolt and I usually come from Destiny 2. I play PvP and the PvE a lot. I have a rich history in shooter games like Battle Royale such as Apex Legends, or of the games like Valorant that I've actually dabbled in before, and some third-person shooters. I've played some more hardcore games and I've played some more hero shooter, space magic type of games. You can see this as a first impressions. I'm going to share some of the things that I like, some of the good, some of the ugly, pros and cons, some things that I'm pretty hopeful about, and some things that I feel kind of doom and gloom about. You will hear me talk about some topics that are going to be addressed by the time that the game launches. I'll give you the list right now. So the alpha supposedly does not include final visuals and graphics, including animations and lighting, the full and polished UI. It doesn't include all runners, all zones, including the marathon ship, pinnacle and endgame content, all weapons, items, consumables, implants, cores, and mods, all factions and upgrades, long-term progression in systems, the complete narrative in storytelling systems, and final shipping content, rank play, and lastly, the final balance. All right, what were some things that I liked? What was I hopeful about? So to start things off, the gunplay was pretty crispy. This is something you expect from Bungie. If you played Halo 1, Destiny 1 PvP, or Destiny 2 PvP, you've always liked the gunplay for the most part, and it's no different here. So this means things like drawing your weapons, aiming down sights, and the hit registration, it all feels pretty good. I would say it's no different in Marathon. While the weapons are much slower, they feel more clunky or heavier, I think it was necessary to fit the vibe of an extraction game. And what really sold me with this is that at the start, your weapons are pretty much at their worst state. You start adding mods, you start getting such upgrades like implants that improve your dexterity of your weapons, and it starts to feel much faster and way better. If you're a controller player, this is pretty good news for you, and you're not surprised. You kind of come to expect Bungie having good gameplay on the controller. But if you're a mouse and keyboard player, things might be different. Your feelings towards the gunplay might not be the same as someone that likes those Bungie controller type of games. Because you see, Bungie isn't really known for good gunplay on MNK, but I have to tell you, as a Destiny 2 player who plays MNK, it's pretty solid. I've played plenty of games on MNK where there's so many particles, muzzle flash, or just things that obscure your vision and get in the way of your aiming with your mouse. But Bungie has really good, clean type of gunplay that I think MNK players will come to love. There are some criticisms I have about, the whole controller, mouse and keyboard, and of course the big one, aim assist, that we'll get to later in the video. Besides the gunplay being one of the first things that caught my attention, I have to mention that the map design is top tier, and this is not something that you come to appreciate in your first couple of hours of play a marathon. This is something that you have to play plenty of hours, sink in time to start to realize, wow, the map designs, the whole way that you climb buildings and the angles that you can get, the positioning, the rotations, the flow of these POIs is pretty good. Originally, it wasn't something that I was appreciating or really paying attention to, other than the art style. At first it was mostly like looking at, oh, look how pretty these buildings look, or look how these other buildings don't really look that unique. And then over time, as I was starting to get more PvE fights, more fights against PvP players, I felt like I was playing almost a battle royale mixed in with some like Destiny 2 PvP maps in it. Well, on the topic of battle royale, I have to say, I got a lot of those vibes, man. It felt like I was playing Apex Legends ranked for some of my games. It was really exciting and intense because that's kind of what BR games do. There's high stakes, you die, you go back to the lobby. Only one team can place first, but in this case, you lose your loot, right? There's a lot of risk losing. There's third parties too, but not to the degree that you would expect in like most battle royales. You kind of have to be someone that already plays those games to really understand what I'm trying to say and appreciate some of these mechanics in your gunplay and the way that you rotate around the map to understand like what I'm really trying to say. From healing to the way that you engage and call out players, it all felt really familiar. I had to bring up that genre of games because I wasn't made aware of some of the cool things about this game until I started fighting teams more consistently, and then got into matches where I had to fight more teams back to back than I was used to. And some of the things that I want to point out that I really liked was looting was pretty fast. It wasn't a lot of stash management where you would go loot a body, you have the items loading little by little, and there's going to be ways to speed that up, of course, with like implants or faction upgrades, but you have the stash available. You know the currency that you want. There's little friction in that. You could just pull the items, the important things, and once you start to develop that eye of what materials you're hunting for, what ammo type that you need, and what's high value enough to bring into your backpack, you play less Tetris pretty much in your backpack, and you're just getting out of that stash right away and you're going back to actual gameplay. I think that's really important so that it's not always constantly stash management or like inventory gameplay. While some people might like, you know, just sitting in the inventory, managing, thinking about that stuff like that, I have to be one of those few to say that I like that I just got straight back into the actual game and I could just rotate, sit there, guard the bodies, or just start thinking about my next move. So I'm out of the inventory, right? I'm sitting on the bodies, guarding, or I'm looking for another gym bag to loot. It brings me to the next thing that I wanted to give some props to that I liked in the game is that it seems pretty easy to see what you need to loot. Things don't really overlap too hard. I played some other games that like drop loot on the floor, specifically battle royale games where it can get really crowded and messy on the floor areas where players are dying, but I think Marathon does a pretty good job not overlapping all that stuff on the floor. If you play something like Warzone, I'm not sure if they've ever changed that, but I remember in games like Fortnite 2 where items just splatter all over the floor and you have to like kind of look through what gun it is, what ammo it is, what bandage you're looking for. You get my point. In Marathon, it seems like most things are pretty neat, especially if you're going into buildings. The items that you have to loot have a nice little like highlight glow to them. So if you don't have the best eye, the game does a decent job letting you know, hey, there's something shiny over here. And most players kind of like that. People like shiny things. They're going to gravitate towards it, get your attention, get you looking around the map and the POIs. Before we get into the bad and the ugly, there's two more things that I really want to mention in terms of things that I like and what I'm hopeful about. I have to say comebacks are possible and it's pretty exciting. It might be really hype from your POV if you're the one making the comeback, but I'm not really sure how that impacts the game overall, the health of the match, the intensity, and how it impacts other players that have defeated you. We're not really going to get into that, but I will tell you from my own personal experience, if you're the team that manages to make a comeback, that feels awesome because dying in this game, dying in an extraction game in general feels horrible. So I love that I'm able to revive my teammate or my teammate is able to revive me if I got sniped for standing still for too long. And you get nice surprises too. When you think you were down bad and things were going absolutely horrible, could turn out to be a match where you just come out walking with some of the best stuff possible. And that is exciting because I would have some games where we were just not running into any loot. You know, we were getting knocked, but we were still getting away with our lives. And in the end, we came out so loaded and that felt like such a W. Lastly, it's pretty easy to get right back into the match. So the sponsor kits are pretty clutch. They just give you a nice little loadout. The PvE bots are there to just kind of get like random guns, loots, maybe some meds that can just get you back into the action. So you can start playing a little bit and not just have a knife only. That is a W in my opinion. Things like it being easy to hop right back in, the comebacks being possible, and especially the map design being top tier has me pretty hopeful in a lot of the points that I mentioned because we only got to play 2 maps in this alpha. So you got the starter one and then the second one, which is Marsh something, Dire Marsh. And I usually see them kind of like tutorial maps where you're meant to learn the game and, you know, get your feet wet, getting ready for the big boy maps that are going to come out in the official launch and then later in the future. So if the map design is already this strong, I can't imagine how much better it's going to be on the bigger maps that are rumored to have some crazy mechanics and puzzles and whatnot. So in that regard, I'm really curious. They definitely sparked some curiosity in me. The map design is very strong. And with the whole battle royale vibes, like it basically makes me pretty hopeful about just playing the game in general and having a good time because I play some extraction games. I don't have hundreds of hours in multiple games though, but one of the pain points has always been like how slow it can be and people wanting to rat in bushes, laying in the grass. This one made me feel like I can play pretty aggressive. There's some rotations, there's like action, there's call outs being made, you can communicate, and there's always like a lot of sound happening. So it makes me hopeful as someone that isn't really a big fan of that genre, that at least there's more action, right? There's more things happening. Well, those are the things that I liked about Marathon. Let me know if you agree. Are there some stuff that I didn't mention that you liked? Let me know in the comments below. We are about to talk about some of the things I didn't like, the bad, and then later some of the ugly. So remember, this is a first impression, so some of these things are already being worked on, might not be changed, or will be different when the game actually launches. The best way I can start this segment is by just thinking about my early extraction matches that I had on Marathon. It was really boring. It was empty. It felt like there was nothing going on, but part of the reason is because you don't really have high stakes yet. So your backpack, your guns, and your implants, they don't really have any value. And honestly, you don't even have any for a while. So for most of the time you're playing Marathon at the start, it's going to feel like a tutorial, which could be a good or bad thing, depending who you are. And then eventually after some time, the game really does get much better. So I have to let you know that. But at the start, boy, it was tough to get through. In those first couple hours that I was playing Marathon, there were some things that really stood out that I did not like. For example, the POIs all felt kind of the same. There really wasn't anything unique to the environments that I could see, and I was paying pretty close attention. I'm not sure how you guys feel about that, but there were some cool stuff like underground tunnels that, you know, definitely stood out. But for the most part, everything kind of looked the same. But when you go from one map like Perimeter to the Dire Marsh one, you start to see more differences. So I hope it gets a little bit more crazy in the other maps that come out in the future. As I'm running around the map and exploring these POIs, I start paying attention to the movement. You know, we got the heat capacity. So at first, it was pretty lame to have the whole heat capacity, the stamina bar. It gets better over time when you start making upgrades, so I don't mind it too much now, but that is different from the criticisms I'm gonna give to the actual movement. You know, your speed, the weapon speed, what can you do mechanically, right? With the slides and the jumps. It's not exciting. I feel like there was really nothing special about it. And part of the reason is because it's an extraction game. The game has to be strict, and it feels really strict. It doesn't let you break the rules that I feel like I like to do in PvP games, where you have like skill tech, being able to slide down a hill or B-hop or jump around walls, you know, like tech that players kind of like come up with and kind of like break the rules with a little bit. I'm not really looking for anything too extreme that would ruin the flow of the game, but the game is really strict. The movement did start to get a little bit faster after like 10 hours or so, and I'm assuming it's going to feel even better as I start to master the game even more. But it made me realize that there just isn't enough like excitement when you're playing around with your hero, sorry, the runner. And unfortunately, I think those runners are boring because they just have to be. They have these set skills that are pretty basic, and either they don't provide enough or they provide too much. The point is, the movement and the whole like abilities that your characters have are the way they are to try to like fit in that whole like strict rule of it being an extraction game, to not break the balance and the flow and the intensity, so it doesn't turn into like a whole different type of game, I guess. To be honest, I'm not really sure what they could do about that, but for now, I feel like their movement and their characters, they don't really stand out to me, in my opinion. While on the topic of runners, I do want to bring up the balance. So right now, I'm not really a fan that it feels like you need a Blackbird on your squad, because eventually it's going to start forming these metas. It's going to get a little bit repetitive and boring because every team comp is going to look the same. Blackbird having the scams is crazy in an extraction game for information, which who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want to know where the other players are at? Who doesn't want to get pings for potential enemy players hiding in a building? And then there's the other character that just seems quite oppressive and almost like it's breaking the rules that the other characters are following and the rules of an extraction game, and that's the Void character. Its ability to go invis, the smokes, and all the invis, you know, ways to get that ability to proc seems ridiculous. That one character is difficult to kill and has an easy job killing you or disrupting your team. I wanted to make sure I brought that up because I really didn't like the whole characters being like super mandatory or feeling too oppressive, like they don't really fit in the game, because this is only like the first couple of runners we have in the game. There's going to be more at launch, and of course there's going to be more added as content in the future. So it would suck to be a player where we're seeing these characters launch and some of them are like really busted, and then other ones are just a little bit too simple and don't really have any like uniqueness going on to them. There's still a lot missing here as well about your character's potency and how insane they can get, because there's build crafting, but I have to be honest, it hasn't hooked me yet. Even though I've played 15 hours, I like to build craft. I played many games where build crafting is required or encouraged, and I generally enjoy it in those type of games as well. So coming into this game, I give it a fair shot. I was open to the idea of it. I tried it out, And like I said, it hasn't hooked me. But to be honest, it's the alpha, so not everything is available to do the build crafting. But it's just weird because you can have those modifications in plans. So you can get a gold one, but then you could just lose it the next match. And that just kind of sucks because you don't really get to build craft again. You know, it's pretty limiting how much you can build craft. One good note I can say though, before we move on from this point, is that small modifications can be felt in game. I'm not sure if many of you players have the same experience, but adding like 5 heat capacity was actually pretty nice when I was playing the game. I felt like I could sprint longer and slide more. Besides the runners, I think they nailed it for the most part with the weapon balance. Like the snipers sure are pretty oppressive, but I think it's obvious. Everyone is kind of rocking one and everyone is kind of mentioning how cracked they are because there's hit scan, you know, especially on like big maps. It's kind of wild they made snipers hit scan, but I think the weapons and all the fighting and stuff like that is pretty nice. I will have to mention though, like the cues when you're shooting someone, you crack the shields, or if someone is shooting you and they crack your shields, the audio cue is not really there. Which brings me to the whole like audio topic. The feedback of when like the shots are coming towards you, if people are like missing and trying to figure out where people are shooting you, I feel like it's not really there yet, but it's not too bad. Lastly, before we move on to the ugly, there was one last thing that I didn't really like, but I'm not sure what they could do about this. It's not being able to know if all the players you're fighting are from the same team. It's not really clear. I feel like there's something missing that can help identify if you're getting third partied, if you're fighting like a solo player that is kind of running away from a team of 2 or 3. You get my point. It can get really messy. I know some of that mysterious vibes there, trying to figure out how many players are alive, how many are left, is required, but when you knock players and you kill everyone on their team, sometimes they just stay alive. Like they don't even like fully knockout, so it kind of leads you to think that there might be one left. So there's a lot of confusion in those fights, especially because there's so much high risk. I feel like they can't really afford to have questions unanswered when there's like high action happening on potential third party and you got all this loot in the backpack that you really care about. Okay, squad, so the last section is pretty much the ugly. Some of the stuff I really didn't like. Maybe you could even say that you hate some of this stuff. Some of these things even made me feel kind of pessimistic about the game. So let me just get it out of the way. The game is really easy. You know, I'm not a pro at extraction games. It could be because of my experience in battle royale games and playing Destiny that it might feel more easier to me. So definitely let me know, but I feel like the game is really easy. Like the PvE bots weren't really a challenge. The whole friction of like what items to bring with you, what materials you need, is not really there. The whole trying to figure out what guns should you be hunting for, what mods should you be equipping, there's not really much confusion there either. It's pretty straightforward. I believe the PvE will get more difficult in other maps, and that can always be tuned, but right now people were glazing, really hyping up the PvE difficulty, and I just did not see it. Aside the PvE, even the game itself, when you're fighting other players, feels pretty easy. It seems like everyone can just land their shots. This could be the case because I'm in an alpha, so it's like streamers, content creators being invited, and in a real setting, I'm gonna play more people that aren't like gamers, right? There aren't people that are hardcore PvPers that, you know, are usually already like loaded up in this type of game. But the aiming felt really easy. I feel like I had already figured out the game in my first couple of hours of playing. There wasn't much, oh my god, I'm learning, or I need to master this or that. I felt the game was already figured out for me, and that's bad. Like, what am I supposed to master? Where's my hype and encouragement, motivation to get better at the game when I feel like I already understand it and I know what it is? Aside the game's difficulty, I feel like the only big obstacles and challenges that really happened during the game when you're fighting players was audio issues and getting cleaned up by a different team, because there's third parties in this match. It's very possible to third party. If you don't know what that means, basically there's a team fighting and it can last quite a while, and another team can just pull up and clean up the winning team, or both teams in fact, and get all their loot, which is horrible feeling, especially in an extraction game where there's so much on the line. You have all this loot on your backpack. In a battle royale, it sucks, but definitely not to the same degree as it would be in Marathon. So yeah, the audio, oh my god. So there's good audio and then there's bad audio. I could tell when players are interacting with bots, which was perfect. Like, you know, there's some props to give there. They nailed it with the birds like flying if someone's walking by, and the shots don't seem to be heard from across the universe, which I think is good because you can have your own little fights without people hearing them and running to those shots. Things like that. The ambience is pretty nice, but when it comes to the actual runners being nearby to you, the audio cue of that, it seems very iffy to the part where like you would just complain of like no audio, right? People are sneaking up or walking towards you, sprinting towards you, and they get free shots, or they jump at you with a shotgun, you get 3, 2, 1, whatever. And you're like, dude, where was he? Where was my audio? he was there? You know what I mean? You have all these questions that'd be really frustrating. I think there's too much to risk there with your loot that you can afford to have bad audio situations like that. While the game being in its alpha right now might feel a bit too easy and having some audio issues, it thankfully doesn't get in the way of my personal enjoyment, having some fun, getting some good fights, being able to find ways to actually overcome other players, even if their shot are laser beams as well. But one thing that you can't really get around is the experience of looting for items. It feels like there's almost no items to really get, and you're always searching and hunting around rocks and looking through doors and lockers to never find the items and materials that you really need. Especially if you're trying to interact with upgrades of the factions, you can get pretty burnt right away trying to like look around for little pieces, and then you finally, let's say, get 4 of the item that you really need. You spent, you know, a lot of time in the match collecting, or plenty of games trying to collect that item, and in the end you could still die, and holy, you would just have to do that all over again. Yeah, you can experience that if you play Marathon, and it sucks. What also sucks right now in the alpha is the progression system. So I've invested a lot of hours into the progression system because this is just going to be one of those major pillars to keep players kind of grinding Marathon. It's supposed to be one of those pillars that keeps me hooked every day, wanting to sign in to grind, especially, you know, season to season, looking for the updates or whatever. It's progression, right? Like upgrading your factions, upgrading your stashes, getting higher tier rewards of whatever. Progression system in terms of the factions is pretty boring. I didn't like it at all, man. I was doing the priority contracts, which is the narrative system, and let me get this out of the way. Like, I really tried to get immersed in the story and the narrative, pay attention to it, but it lost me, bro. It lost me. I gave up after a while. Like, I just let it play in the back, maybe read a sentence or two, or just skipped it in general. It just lost me. I wasn't interested. I'm not sure if I'm just not that type of player to really care, but I have played single player games. I love me a good story, but yeah, I wasn't really interested in the narrative. Like, it made me lose interest. And the priority contracts had these quests. If you play Destiny, you have bounties, or maybe some other games that require you to do like certain tasks to get certain kills or do certain things to complete an objective. They're really tedious, which is okay, I guess, in a PvE only game. But when you're going into Marathon and extraction game and you have the occasional like PvP, dude, it really sucks trying to collect 4 or whatever, or do 1,000 damage on an NPC with a grenade, and then just getting ran up on PvP players that like ruin that, you know, progress that you made, or cause you to like just lose everything and have to go back in, you know, running around for scraps to try to find more grenades. And I know you're lacking context here, but I'm telling you based on my personal experience, and you're gonna be able to relate in some other ways. Yeah, it's just not really a good time, because if you're a PvP player, like, that progression system is going to be a major turnoff. And if you're an extraction player and you've done this before, it's like, I've done this, I'm used to it, it's not that big of a deal. But you would agree, it's still pretty boring. It's going to be tedious and annoying when there's PvP involved. I guess I was just hoping that, even though this is kind of like one of those standard rules in extraction games, that Bungie would kind of break that rule and find ways to like kind of revolutionize that and make it way more exciting. But for now, yeah, the priority contracts were just really boring. But it's stuff that you have to do to progress, right? Because some of these are like stash upgrades, heat capacity upgrades, agility buffs, being able to get like a fully modded like sniper rifle, just buy it from the market. It's some really crazy stuff that you're gonna have to invest a lot of time into in the future. And I have to bring it up now because some people might not even realize it until they have like 15 plus hours into the game. It's like, damn, I don't like doing this. Phew, that was a lot to get out there. That was the good, the bad, some of the ugly. I'm hopeful, not so hopeful in some other departments. I'm having fun a lot with the game right now, and I hope I continue to have more fun with the game. I'm curious to see how they react to feedback. I'm curious to see where the game goes in the future. I'm gonna be paying attention to it. I just want to grind, and I'm gonna keep sinking hours into Marathon if it allows me to, if it keeps accepting me and giving me the like dopamine, that adrenaline rush, those good moments, and if my audience continues to enjoy it. Anyways, let me know what you think. I'm so curious about your thoughts in the comments down below. If you want more videos like this, drop me a like. I stream on twitch.tv/ifrostbolt and also on my YouTube channel if you want to come in, talk some more, and watch some more gameplay. Anyways, thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.